Hey, Whitney, are you going to let everyone in or
Yes, I
someone?
start it,
Okay.
and then I will also make sure if we have any staff as attendees, I'll bring them over as panelists.
Yay, thank you. Okay, I'll push play just
Yeah,
here in a minute.
all you have to do is whenever I hear that begin, I will go live.
Okay.
Hey Maribel, I'm sorry, I'm not a host anymore. It's not letting me go live. I'm sorry, I just realized that. Can you make me host again, maybe? Or can you start it? It won't let me, I don't see that option.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our 2026 Request for Applications webinar. My name is Chanel Ford. I'm the Director of Programs for the Native American Agriculture Fund. I grew up on the Spokane Indian Reservation. I'm an enrolled member of the Spokane Tribe, and I am very grateful to be here today with you all. So today we are going to be discussing specifically our RFA overview. And with that, we'll discuss the changes, we'll talk about eligibility, we'll talk about funding categories, deadlines, found it walkthrough, and a Q&A to wrap us up. I also want to note that this webinar is scheduled from 2 to 4 p.m. Central Time, and it will also be recorded and available on our website. To discuss with you our Q&A process, I'm going to pass it on over to Whitney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Whitney Sawney. I am a citizen of Cherokee Nation and the Director of Communications and Policy at NAAF. We are grateful for your time today, and so thank you for joining us for a review of our grant application. But before we start our presentation, just a few housekeeping items. First, we will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of this presentation. And we do have members of our team monitoring the questions as they come in through the Zoom question and answer box and chat. To ensure we're able to communicate all information and make this accessible to those joining in by phone, we'll make sure to read all of the presentation slides. And as another reminder, the webinar will be recorded and posted to the NAAF website, along with an option to download the presentation slides following the conclusion of this webinar. All right, and now we are going to hear a welcome message from our CEO, Tony Sandra McLaughlin.
Good afternoon, Liam Lempt. Thank you for being here. First of all, I want to let each and every one of you know that we appreciate the work that you do day in and day out within your communities to support tribal agriculture. Your dedication and leadership truly make a difference, and we're grateful for your partnership. For those newer to NAAF, the Native American Agriculture Fund is a private charitable trust. We are the largest philanthropic organization dedicated solely to supporting Native agriculture. Since our founding, we've deployed nearly $90 million across 590 different programs. In past years, NAAF has identified specific priority funding areas that we call special emphasis. This year, we chose not to include this special emphasis in the spring funding cycle. Instead, we are being flexible and adaptive to the needs of our community, and we're offering a second funding cycle that will take place later in the year. We know that you're facing challenges, and again, we want to help you in your resilience by being adaptive to those needs. We are committed to being more than just a funder. We want to be here as a long-term partner. We want to help these organizations and entities and tribal communities through sharing knowledge and best practices, as well as learning from you. This year, we look forward to all of the applications that we're going to receive. We hope that you stay tuned for the remainder of our webinars and pay particular attention to our Q&A sessions and office hours that are new this year. So again, Leemlimp, thank you for being part of NAAF, or if you're new here, welcome. We look forward to meeting you, and good luck in this year's funding cycle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So Chanel was going to review our application requirements in a moment, but to start us off, I want to provide more context about NAAF and how we came to be and why our grant funding is focused on increasing access to capital for Native farmers and ranchers. At its core, NAAF's foundation is about healthy lands, healthy people, and healthy economies. NAAF is unique in that we are a private charitable trust and we are not a part of the federal government. So our funding is private, and that gives us the flexibility to be solutions-oriented and hands-on with our grantees and the projects that we fund. But we are also legally bound by our trust agreement, which is a governing document that outlines who is eligible and how our grant funding must be used. And the reason that our trust exists, the reason that NAAF exists at all, goes back to a long history of barriers to credit and lending. So I'm going to go over that in more detail. NAAF was created through the Cypre provision of the Keepseagull class action lawsuit settlement, which was called Keepseagull v. Vilsack. That was a case rooted in alleged discrimination that Native farmers and ranchers experienced when accessing USDA lending and services. The core of Keepseagull was about production agriculture, Native farmers and ranchers seeking loans and loan servicing through USDA and encountering things such as denials, delays, poor processing, and in many cases, blatant discrimination. The roots of that case actually stretch back decades. In fact, some of the claims tied to this go back to the late 1970s and early 1980s. There were Native producers who raised concerns and filed complaints, only for some of those claims to sit idle and unaddressed for a number of years. The Keepseagull case was filed in the late 1990s and moved through decades of litigation. Around the same time of Keepseagull, there were other farmer discrimination cases, which included Pickford 1 and 2 for Black farmers, Love and Garcia for women and Hispanic farmers. And also at the same time, Native producers across the country experienced similar harms. And because of this, a class action was filed under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act for unfair access to credit and poor loan servicing. And then by 2010 and 2011, the case reached a settlement. And it's important to clarify a common point of confusion here is that Keepseagull was a class action, but it was not resolved as a class judgment in the way that people often assume. It was resolved through settlement and an individual claims process, where individual claimants selected different tracks with different levels of burden of proof required. In total, 4,300 claims were submitted and 3,600 were approved. The settlement from Keepseagull included debt relief, tax support, and additional programmatic improvements intended to reduce the likelihood of those original harms from continuing. So unclaimed funds from the settlement after the claims process and the claimants were awarded The settlement included a cypre provision, which is a legal doctrine allowing unclaimed funds from a class action settlement to be distributed to a nonprofit organization, in this case, a nonprofit serving Native American farmers and ranchers, as long as their work aligns with reducing or eliminating the original discrimination harms that were claims during keep seagull. So what this means is that cypre funds were distributed to address the circumstances that originally created the problem. So cypre is often used in class action lawsuits and settlement agreements, but the key takeaway is that you cannot deviate too far from the core issues that are central to the original harms. And that is why our trust agreement, which is our governing document, outlines that we must fund within specific boundaries and to eligible entities. And as a part of the keep seagull outcome, the court ultimately directed the remaining funds be deployed for the long-term benefit of Native agriculture through a structure, and that structure became NAAF, and NAAF was formally established in 2018. So why is access to capital at the center of all of our funding? Everything we do flows from the original harms that Native producers experienced. The people who filed keep seagull claims were harmed because they could not access credit fairly, and because they experienced things such as denials and delays and discrimination, poor servicing when trying to participate in USDA lending and assistance programs. So our funding must connect back to the broader umbrella of access to capital. And when we say access to capital, we're not only talking about just loans. We're talking about the full ecosystem that makes credit usable and fair. So things like credit education, credit readiness or coaching, lending infrastructure, like building institutions that can lend in credit deserts, ag lending capacity, because we know that agricultural loans are unique and they require a specialized knowledge. Another example would be how lending works in a tribal and trust land context. So really, NAAF supports a broad set of strategies under this umbrella as long as it supports agricultural business assistance, technical support, education, and advocacy services, because access to capital, as we all know, is a connected system. And our trust agreement defines who is eligible to receive NAAF funding. And there are 4 eligible entity types, and that includes tribal governments, 501c3 nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, and community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. So when we ask, and you ask, why is access to capital at the center of NAAF's funding? Why are we seeing that so consistently throughout the application process? It is because NAAF exists due to the case about credit access. And on the next slide, I want to give another quick overview of what agriculture looks like in Indian country, and also an overview of our previous funding cycles. So we know that tribal communities often exist in deeply rural places and sometimes in checkerboarded regions where Native and non-Native producers overlap. But you'll see in this image on the screen that Native producers really spread across the United States, with the largest number of producers being in Oklahoma, Arizona, and New Mexico. A lot of those areas overlap where a number of the keep seagull claimants or keep seagull claims were filed. Since 2018, NAAF has funded nearly $86 million in grants to all of our eligible entities. And we have funded across 590 programs that have helped expand economic opportunities to access to capital, building capacity, and strengthening agriculture. That has impacted more than 105,000 individuals, including more than 50,000 students and youth, as well as more than 53,000 ranchers, farmers, harvesters, and fishers with NAAF support. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chanel, our Director of Programs, to review our request for application process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Whitney. I appreciate that. So now we're going to dive into information regarding this year's RFA overview process. You'll be able to see, I think we'll provide a link in the chat to our website that houses our RFA overview. So this is going to be basically the document you're going to utilize while applying for this year's application. So Next slide. Thank you so much. So eligible entities, 501c3 organizations, educational organizations, community development financial institutions, also known as CDFIs, and tribes and their instrumentalities are all eligible to apply for NAAF's funding. Eligibility requirements must be met at time of application. There's more in-depth information about eligibility on page 5 of that RFA overview document I was referring to. I do want to go back just to share a few notes in regard to these 4 entities, just so that you can get kind of an understanding of what it is that we're referring to when we say eligibility. So per our trust agreement, as Whitney mentioned, nonprofit organizations with our IRS Section 501c3 must have tax-exempt status. If such status has not been achieved, such organizations may apply for funding through a fiscal sponsor that has received such 501c3 tax-exempt status. I'll be chatting a little bit more about fiscal sponsor here in a bit. Our educational organizations that apply are described in Section 170B1A2 of the Internal Revenue Code, tribally controlled or bureau-operated schools, as well as schools operated by an Indian tribe or tribal organization, align with the language in the Section 170 of the Internal Revenue Code, qualifying them as eligible education institutions for the Native American Agriculture Fund's NAAF grant. Also, tribally controlled or bureau-operated schools granted under the Tribally Controlled Schools Act or deemed eligible by Section 5205 fall within this category as well. Similarly, schools operated by Indian tribes or tribal organizations that enroll K through 12 students, including preschool, also meet this eligible criteria. Community development financial institutions, our CDFIs, must also hold a tax-exempt status, so a 501c3 status. An instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe, including a nonprofit organization chartered under the tribal law of a state or federally recognized tribe that furnishes assistance designed to further Native American farming and ranching activities, provided, however, that one use of any grant funds by such grant recipient shall be restricted exclusively to charitable and educational purposes. 2, the grant recipient shall annually provide NAAF with audited financial statements and reports as required by NAAF. I also want to flag here that if you are a tribe, we do require you submit a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. And this just goes along in terms of the amount of funding awarded and the length of the grant. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Lenora to share an important notice.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Lenora Moore. I'm a compliance officer here at NAAF, and I'm a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. So we just wanted to go ahead and let you know an important notice. For any of our returning grantees, if you have had a grant with us in the past or you have a current active grant, we just wanted to let you know that it is very important that you be up to date or in compliance with all of your reporting requirements for that grant. And so if you have fallen behind on reporting for your grant, then you will not be eligible to apply for 2026 funding. This means that if you have a report like a quarterly, mid-year, annual, or final report that is past due by the time the application closes, then you will not be considered for 2026 funding. We want to work with you closely to try to make sure that everyone's up to date by the time that date comes. So please, if you need help, reach out to your POC and we'll do our best to get you squared away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lenora. So as I shared earlier, I noted fiscal sponsorship. So NAAF encourages startup nonprofit organizations that have applied for their 501c3 status from the IRS. You have not received a favorable determination letter. You can apply through a fiscal sponsor. They can provide important technical support for proposed project activities. If fiscal sponsors are used, this fiscal sponsor must be an eligible 501c3 organization and should follow the guidance in NAAF's fiscal sponsor information. That fiscal sponsor information is located in our FAQ document on our website. We just want to flag this as well. The relationship between you, the grantee, and your fiscal sponsor, if you choose to go this route, is not managed by us. So this is a sole responsibility of you, the grantee, and that fiscal sponsor to maintain that relationship. Hey, so here we have our NAAF 2026 RFA overview slide. I've covered a little bit of this, and Lenora's covered a little bit as well. I will dive deeper into addressing access to capital, but what I'd like to touch on is allowable and unallowable use of funds. And this information can be found on page 3 of our RFA overview. To go over briefly just a few examples of allowable, we're required to only provide grants to entities specifically outlined in our trust agreement. So those 4 entities that are mentioned: educational institutions, 501c3s, tribes and instrumentalities, or CDFIs. The trust agreement prohibits NAAF from providing grant or loan funding directly to individual Native farmers and ranchers. So unfortunately, we will not accept applications directly from individuals. The key focus areas for which funding is allowed under the trust agreement are broadly described as business assistance, ag education, technical support, and advocacy services. Eligible entities are described in our overview in more depth on page 5. Funding may be used for projects that are either 12 or 24 months in duration. Funds can be used for project support, general organizational support, scholarships and regrants, lending programs, or capital expenditures. All applications must contain clear descriptions of the project activities and the population targeted for such support, and budget narratives must clearly show how funds are going to be used. Use of all NAAF provided templates within the application are required. So I'm going to share here next the type of applicants or uses of funds that are not eligible under our 2026 request for applications. So entities that do not provide business assistance, ag education, technical support, or advocacy services to Native farmers and ranchers, work based outside the United States or its territories, projects that do not provide assistance and or resources designed to impact and further assist in the success of Native farmers and ranchers, projects that seek funding predominantly to provide outreach on USDA programs and services, resources for those types of activities that are already provided by the USDA, projects that assist individual Native farmers, ranchers, and producers, use of funds that are not restricted exclusively to charitable and educational purposes described in IRS Section 170C2B. You are not allowed to use funds for litigation. You are not allowed to use funds for lobbying, and any other information in regard specifically to unallowable and allowable costs, as I said before, can be found in our RFA overview. All right, now getting into our targeted projects. So Joe and I will go over the 4 entities and how you can apply if this is your entity. So first off, we have 501c3 organizations, general focus application. Your available pool is $1 million. The minimum amount you can apply for is $100,000, and the maximum amount you can apply for is $250,000. So some projects can focus on ag education, technical support, business assistance, and advocacy services. So in the middle here, you're actually going to see a few of the grantees that we had funded from 2025. I wanted to just give you kind of an insight on a few here and what they spent their funding on. So we have American Farm Bureau. They're out of Washington, D.C. They had a project called the Purple Plow Challenge that focuses on Native American student interests, such as resilience and food security, providing authentic hands-on learning opportunities that connect science, technology, and ag. And through this project, it's really neat. These students are going to identify a real ag issue, design and test a solution, and present their findings to help build critical skills in leadership, problem solving, and financial literacy. We also have Indian Pueblo Cultural Center out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this project is really supporting entrepreneurs through business seminars, farm and garden trainings, and they're also providing stipends for up to 90 Native entrepreneurs. This project addresses gaps in mentorship, funding, and market access by providing training in financial planning, sales strategies, and technical support. Okay.
Thank you, Chanel. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Joe Graham. I'm from the Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico, and I'm the point of contact for educational organizations. This year, the available pool is $1 million, with a minimum application level of $100,000 and a maximum application level of $200,000. Educational organizations can apply in any of the areas, business assistance, education, tech support, or advocacy services. We have, so in the middle there, you see some programs that were funded this last year. Arizona Board of Regents, that's the University of Arizona in Tucson. Um, but what they're doing is they're working with their FERTEP agents to do outreach on all the different reservations that they work with. And in those universities, I mean, in those reservation sites, they're creating what they call task kits. They're like emergency kits for ranchers to be able to do first line work in kind of like veterinary and animal health. Um, you also see on there the United Tribes Technical College. That's in Bismarck, North Dakota. And what they're doing is they're doing an outward facing um, fruit and vegetable stand, which is going to be become part of their curriculum in ag business, so that students will be able to get some hands-on experience in marketing, buying, purchasing, all the different aspects, including selling, the different parts of ag business curriculum. Um, some educational organization reminders. We look at a broad definition for educational organization, and it covers all those under Section 170 BIA, BIA, II of the IRS code, including K-12 schools, post-secondary institutions such as TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, NASNT, Native American serving non-tribal institutions, and other institutions that must have a history and experience in serving Native farmers and ranchers. Also included is BIE schools, Bureau of Indian Education schools. Further, institutions the bigger institutions that have FERTEP agents, the RFA should be developed to include the FERTEP agents' participation. Next. Okay. NAAF encourages BIE schools to apply for funding. And NAAF is very interested in investing in programs that provide information and guidance to Native youth interested in choosing food and agriculture as their future career choice, as well as specifically reaching out to Native students who attend these schools. Okay. I'm also the point of contact for the tribal grants. And so here's some important reminders for tribes. Each tribe that's granted is going to have to supply a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. This is part of the grant agreement, so it's required and there's no exceptions. Also, if a tribe is working in a project regarding industrial hemp or including it, feasibility or market studies only. No funding of production. NAAF will not fund production of hemp. Next. Okay, so for the tribes, the available pool is $1 million. The minimum is $100,000 and the maximum is $250,000. We mentioned before, the general focus is on business assistance, ag education, technical support, and/or advocacy services. And some of the 2025 grantees include the Fort Berthold Land and Livestock Association. At Fort Berthold, they are putting miles and miles of fence up to protect, not only to protect range, but to keep animals where they need to be so they're not jumping onto highways. And it's a lot of rural country up there, and if people are driving around in the middle of the night and there's a cow on the road, that could be very, very dangerous. The Crow Creek Sioux Tribe, Hunkpati processors, what they're doing is they're trying to purchase they've actually purchased already large grain silos so that they can get ahead of storage situations in their tribe. So these are just some examples of the kind of projects that are there. And of course, if you go to our website and you go to the tab on grantees, you can find many, many more examples. Next. Okay, so we talked about tribes and their instrumentalities is the way we said it. So instrumentalities of tribes, state or federally recognized tribes, can mean any number of things. Tribal governments have the latitude to determine which entities are instrumentalities of their governments. NAAF needs only proper documentation of that status. If an organization wishes to be considered as an instrumentality of a tribal government, the organization must secure and submit an authorizing document from their tribal government to that specific effect. A statement from an organization other than a tribal government will not suffice for this purpose. So for my tribe in New Mexico, in the Laguna Pueblo, the Pueblo of Laguna, could apply for a grant. The Department of Natural Resources is under the tribe, so they could apply for a grant. We have different villages in our pueblo, and each has a set of leaders that we call the mayordomos or the mairumas. And so the mairumas could, as a village, apply because they are a part and instrumentality of the overall tribe. So, and I spoke with some folks up in Alaska, and they had a consortia that is made up of several different Alaska villages. And as a group, that consortia could apply as a tribe. So those are just some examples. And when it really comes down to it, it'll be decided on a case-to-case basis.
Okay, I'm going to speak to our sovereign immunity waiver. So the Native American Agriculture Fund is a private charitable trust created by the 2010 settlement of Keep Seagull, as we reviewed earlier in this presentation. The final settlement agreement provided for the distribution of grants to federal and state recognized tribal governments and their instrumentalities. So NAAF recognizes that tribes are immune from suit or action as a sovereign government, and that sovereign immunity is vital to the functioning of tribes in all of its subdivisions and subordinate bodies. The waiver of a tribe's immunity from suit or action is occasionally required when entering into certain transactions. So the court-approved trust agreement that created NAAF contains a provision that requires tribal governments to provide a limited waiver of sovereign immunity in order to receive NAAF grant funding. The reason for this requirement stems from NAAF serving as a fiduciary of the trust funds with a duty to protect its funds from fraud or gross mismanagement. For grant purposes, accessible waivers of tribal sovereign immunity are limited to the amount of the NAAF grant and for the duration of the grant relationship. If a tribe or tribal entity wants to accept NAAF grant funding, it must work with the tribe's legal counsel to adopt a waiver of sovereign immunity related to the NAAF funding and a resolution for the tribal governing body. So tribal governments and instrumentalities must provide waivers and resolutions within the 3 months of receiving of the NAAF grant award. Failure to submit an executed waiver and accompanying resolution in a timely manner will result in forfeiture of any award amounts. Both documents, which include the waiver and the tribal resolution, can be pre-approved by NAAF to expedite the effort, and getting your documents pre-approved will also save you time during the application and post-award period.
Awesome. Thank you, Whitney. And I apologize, y'all. I did not even share with you our points of contact. So Joe had mentioned that he is the point of contact for our tribe's entities and as well as our EDUs. I am the point of contact for our CDFI projects and am serving as the point of contact for our 501c3s and up until Riley Disatel's return. So what that means is if you are funded with a NAAF grant, then you have a dedicated team that will work with you per your entity that you apply with will work with you throughout your 12 or 24 months with us here at NAAF. So just wanted to flag that. Thank you for reminding me about that, Joe. And I also wanted to share too, you gave a great example of an instrumentality and how to apply via an instrumentality or a tribe. And I wanted to note that tribes and 501c3s can also apply simultaneously. So for example, on my reservation, there's Spokane Tribal Network. They are a nonprofit organization on the Spokane Indian Reservation. They are separate from the tribe, but serve the tribal community. The Spokane Tribe applied for funding, and so did the Spokane Tribal Network. So a tribe applied and a nonprofit from that same tribe applied, and that they were allowed to do that. So we have had questions in the past of, oh my gosh, if there's multiple programs applying for funding, are we going to be ineligible if you see these projects come through and it's from the same tribal community? As long as the projects are not identical and they are separate projects, then you can apply if you're from the same tribal community. That does not mean that you are, your application is ineligible. So I wanted to note that. So discussing here our CDFIs, you'll notice that the available pool of funding here is $5.5 million. And as Whitney shared and I shared earlier, since we are not allowed per our trust agreement to directly distribute funding out to a sole farmer rancher producer, a great way to do that is either one through our 501c3s via stipends or re-granting programs, or through our CDFIs in their specific lending programming. So projects usually focus on loan capital, re-granting capital, and technical assistance, business assistance. The available pool here is $5.5 million. And we do not have a minimum or a maximum here. We ask that you do not request the full amount of the available pool. So do not request the full $5.5 million. In the middle here, we have a few of our prior grantees, Occupan out of South Dakota. We have 4 bands, Pacific Northwest Tribal Lending, and People's Partner for Community Development. Pacific Northwest Tribal Lending is actually located in the Pacific Northwest in Western Washington, and they're formerly known as Lummi CDFI. And so if you're familiar with Lummi CDFI, they're now known as Pacific Northwest Tribal Lending. But all of these entities are doing great work in terms of increasing access to capital directly to farmers, ranchers, producers in Indian country. Next slide. So our youth programming, I want to note here, you can apply for our general funding that we just went through, our general category, and apply for a youth project as well. So all entities are eligible. If you're a 501c3, if you are an educational institution, if you are a CDFI, if you are a tribe, you are eligible to apply. The available pool is $1 million. The minimum amount you can apply for is $20,000. The maximum you can apply for is $200,000. Projects can include hands-on food production, support for 4-H, FFA scholarships, youth councils, and other youth and/or education activities. Noting again about the projects, if you were to apply for our general application, you are eligible to apply for the youth programming as well, as long as the applications are not identical. So do not send in the same application twice. They have to be separate projects. Just to flag 2 more recent grantees that we had funded. Wabanaki out of Bangor, Maine has a really neat youth project that they're focusing on supplying resources really to increase the knowledge of their Wabanaki youth. They're doing seed banking, gardening, and they're providing them with hands-on training in hunting and fishing and ocean farming career fields. We also have Star School out of Flagstaff, Arizona. They serve students pre-K to 8th grade, and they're integrating hands-on ag into their curriculum. It's really neat. We were able to do a site visit with them. They created a livestock club, and they're just providing ag education for their young farmers and ranchers and beginning farmers and ranchers. So those are just 2 projects I wanted to note for you. Evaluation criteria. So again, you have heard me reference our RFA overview. Our RFA overview will have this information specifically in it. And I believe it's covered starting on page 22, but I really wanted to get in and just share a few specifics on each one of these criteria bullets here. I also want to flag that in the years past, we had innovation and replicability. This year, we're just scoring on innovation. So noting that if you're seeing this and wondering why the innovation piece is different, but we have all of that in our RFA overview. And so I'm going to share a few specifics, if you don't mind. Let me find it here, on kind of what we are looking for when we're saying impact on access to capital and proposed results and outcomes, etc. So for impact on access to capital, as Whitney shared and I've shared, this is really the root of NAAF. So applicants need to identify how and what extent the project focuses on core access to capital issues of Native farmers and ranchers. You should also discuss the impact their project will have on proving access to capital for those Native farmers and ranchers. And as we shared, there is a video located on our website that goes specifically in depth about impact on access to capital. The proposed results and outcomes criteria is scored at a 25% weight. When reviewing applications, we're going to examine the project approach. We're going to look at identified results and outcomes. And we want y'all to really discuss clear statements of what you're anticipating farmers and ranchers will gain from this, and understand what the development is going to be geared towards, and the implementation through the farmers, ranchers, producers' participation in this project. How realistic and attainable is this project? Is the estimated number? Is your goal setting? And then also what degree, we're going to look at what degree those anticipated results speak to our NAAF priorities and our NAAF mission. Speaking in this context here for CDFI applicants, we're asking that you really showcase the amount and number of potential loans, re-grants, and/or technical assistance that you're going to be providing to those Native farmers and ranchers. Educational organizations or education focus projects discuss the number of students and/or future Native farmers and ranchers that you propose to serve, and the benefits that the students will experience by engaging, in this proposed project. For tribal governments, you can discuss the anticipated impacts on your community and what that will look like. We've shared this before in the past too. Results and outcomes can look different and vary in each community that you come from. So we are understanding that if maybe your project is going to be servicing 5 farmers, ranchers, and producers, but you're nervous that 5 doesn't seem like a big enough number, we understand that 5 farmers, ranchers, producers can have a huge impact on tribal communities, tribal regions, surrounding towns. So be sure to showcase that, even though you might think, gosh, 5 looks, 5 in comparison to some programs that are reaching 25, 50, 100. Just showcase and explain to us what those resources in this project delivered to these 5 farmers, ranchers, producers, what that can do for your overall region or your overall community. Farmer and rancher demand is at 20%. And specifically thinking about the demand, discuss why this activity or this project even exists. How did this even come about? Does it come from a community event and farmers and ranchers said, we need X, Y, and Z? Share with us the willingness that farmers and ranchers have to participate in these activities, and these proposed indicators that reflect interest in the activities, in the project activities itself. So identification also of the intended audience is required, as well as the location of the intended audience. Specifically speaking to project narratives here, they should discuss how you are going to be recruiting the participants or the audience for this project. For CDFI applicants, we suggest that you discuss the demand for loans among an identified target audience. Educational organizations or ed-focused projects discuss the demand or need for the content that's going to be delivered, and the projected number of anticipated participants. For tribal governments, you can discuss farmer and ranchers who are being affected and served through the funded project. So yeah, a little bit there. Team organizational capacity and collaborators, this is 10%. We're interested in understanding the skills and knowledge and all the experience of the projected team and the organization that y'all have that is going to effectively deliver on this project. So, and the proposed activity. So we're interested in seeing these specific individuals identify the relative qualifications and the experience of those primary project personnel. We encourage that. Evaluation is 10%. So if you can share with us how y'all plan to gauge the effectiveness of your project, what's the tracking look like, the success look like, please be sure to spell that out for us so we can get an understanding of how that's going to be determined. And then innovation here, we're evaluating only 10% to which the project's going to employ innovative approach to develop or deliver assistance, tech support, education, and or advocacy services. And what are the materials or tools that you're utilizing to do that?
Thanks, Chanel. So we do want to note that there's only an option of 12 or 24-month projects. So we decided to, a few years ago, we decided to eliminate the 18-month projects, and we found that that works best for everyone involved. And so next we'll move on to some important budget notes. So NAAF does allow our grants to fund some indirect funds, but there is a limit of 15%, and there's no exceptions to this limit. And so that limit is calculated by adding up the personnel and direct funds and applying 15% of that. Any intermediary funds applied for will not go into that calculation. And there's more detail on this within the RFA overview. And so, as Chanel mentioned, we do ask that applicants follow the budget guidelines and use our budget templates that are included in the application. And applicants must abide by their request minimums and maximums that are listed in each category. So some critical deadlines to keep in mind. The application will close May 1st, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. There is no opportunity to edit or submit an application after this deadline. And the last day to ask staff questions regarding an RFA application is April 23rd at 5 p.m. Central Time. So we use an grant-making platform called Foundant to host our application. And you can find that link on our website and also in the RFA overview documents. So if you are a returning applicant, then you can use the existing credentials that you've made before to log on to Foundant. And if you're a new applicant, you can create a new account and follow the provided steps. So once you log on or create your new account, you'll be directed to the applicant dashboard. Here's a preview of what that might look like for you. And you'll see at the top, there's an apply button. And so that's where you'll go to find our application for 2026. And here's what it looks like when you click on that, and then it will bring up the available applications, of which there will only be the 2026 application, and you'll click into it to apply. And this is what it looks like once you get into the body of the application. And from here, you can start filling out your application. We do advise you, the application, we do ask for a lot of detail. So some people like to break the application up into different periods, and so they'll work on it a little bit here and a little bit there. That is perfectly fine to do. Just remember that you're saving your work as you go. So at the very end of the application, there is an option to save your work. Please make sure to do that. And once you've finished filling out the application, please make sure you submit the application, hit that submission button, and that you receive an email confirmation that your application has been submitted.
All right. Thank you so much, Lenora. So that will conclude our 2026 RFA Overview webinar. And we're going to turn it over to y'all for any questions and discussion. Dr. Joe Graham will be leading our Q&A this year, and our team will be sure to answer questions as they come in. If for whatever reason your question didn't pop up until later, or you're going through the application and you need assistance or have questions on the proposed application project, you are welcome to email us at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. And our colleague Jess Morago will handle all of those responses, and she will try to get back to you before the close of business on the day that you have sent that email. And we have Loretta manning our phone line in our North Dakota office. So if you prefer speaking with somebody directly, Loretta will be there to answer questions for you.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Sam. I'm the communications manager for NAAF, and I'm going to be teeing up some of these questions to Dr. Joe Graham. We've had quite the discussion in the Q&A, so if you are feeling compelled to ask a question as we're answering some of these, feel free to just drop those in and we'll go ahead and either get to them in the chat or address them live. So Dr. Graham, it's already been answered, but I wanted to maybe start with the question that we got about can you share more information on the youth project work of the Wabanaki tribe?
Is that the one, Chanel, did you answer that one?
I
you put in-
did, yes.
I put an answer in the staff box. So
Yeah. So you can find more information in regard to past funded projects on our website. If you go to the NAAF website, click on grantees, you can go to current grantees or past grantees. But the information that I had put into the chat here was just a quick brief kind of overview so their Food Gatherers project engages Wabanaki youth ages 10 to 18. They focus on traditional food practices. They do seed saving, they do gardening, they do hunting, fishing, ocean farming, and they're really trying to build resiliency around food sovereignty and sustainability. They formed a youth-led community food sovereignty work group that meets monthly, and they are collaborating with other community projects on new activities that focus on financial literacy, small business development, and these youth will also have an opportunity to sell produce and whatever goods that they have in a youth enterprise zone at their local community common ground fair. So this is just one example of what you could potentially utilize your funding for if you have a youth project as a 501c3.
that one was interesting too because it came through the health department, like health and nutrition department. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, going to put forward this one. Can a nonprofit organization apply for multiple funding tracks? For example, if a nonprofit does training, technical assistance, on the ground work with tribes, and is a CDFI, could that nonprofit apply for the youth track and the CDFI track?
Chanel, you're going to have to help me with this one because I think that all their activities within their grant application would, since they're a CDFI, it would come through the CDFI portal, right?
Right. So I'm sorry, is the question asking
If they do training, technical assistance.
I can jump in on this one, and I believe, and Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong, but the question
I feel
is
like
asking about.
what's the
I feel like
what's the
they're-
question?
I just dropped it
I feel like
in
they're
our
separating
chat.
the parts, right? I
So
feel like
you
they're
can,
separating the parts of what they're doing from the
yeah,
lending, but I
so
think
it's,
all their work together.
yeah. So, can a nonprofit organization apply for multiple funding tracks? So the only thing you can apply for as a nonprofit organization would be our general funding or our youth funding, and you can incorporate in there whatever that looks like. If it's CDF, if it's technical assistance training, on the ground work with tribes, that is totally fine. You would essentially just have to be submitting your application to increase access to capital, to focus on whatever your community, whatever your broad community access to capital statement looks like, or if it's with the specific group of people, or if you're working with a tribe. Now, if you're applying as a CDFI, that project is going to be looking different from whatever your 501c3 project looks like. So I guess I might be getting the question kind of morphed, but a nonprofit organization apply for multiple funding tracks. So you're only allowed to apply, send in one application per category. So that would be through the youth and through our general. Am I answering that correctly?
Hi, I want to jump in here too.
Oh, go ahead, Whitney.
There's a quick question. I think there's a distinction about if a nonprofit also has CDFI status. So they are both a nonprofit and a CDFI if they're eligible for both the nonprofit funding and CDFI funding. And so we're going to confirm that, but I think the answer is yes. But as long as the applications can stand on their own. So for example, they cannot be dependent on one another. They have to be able to be different projects, different focus. And an example to that is if one does not get funded and the other one does, it can't, the results of that and the impact of that cannot be affected if it's reliant on the other funding request. And we'll confirm about whether or not, just give us a moment. We're going to confirm about whether or not you can apply both as a nonprofit and a CDFI if you're the same organization. So we're gonna get back to you on that one.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Does work with NRCS conflict or align with this project? And so I don't know if that person...
it doesn't conflict if the projects are aligned. There's stuff in NRCS that has to do with gathering and traditional agriculture and that kind of stuff. That is right in line with what we're doing. But if it's NRCS work that's way out on the natural resources edge, that would take you further away from this agricultural grant.
And also an important note on that too. So if you're working with an entity of USDA, our funding cannot replicate USDA funding. So essentially anything that USDA should be funding or that they already fund, our NAAF funding cannot be used in that scenario.
Okay, awesome. All right. So this is from Anonymous. What kind of grant would we apply for if we wanted to start up a community chicken farm? Our chicken farmers would be the 4-H participants, and their activities can create toys and snacks for them. And hosts and panelists, I just dropped it in the chat so you can reread that question.
What, Sam? Something about chickens?
What kind of grant would we apply for if they wanted to start up a community chicken farm? So just our general grant.
If it was for 4-H, it'd probably be a good idea to go through youth, I would think.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, as long as, so our application, if you look on our website and review our RFA overview, it goes through basically what we look to fund, right? So increasing access to capital, business assistance, technical assistance, re-granting. So it would really fit, it would really just look like like Joe just mentioned, you could potentially apply via our youth track and focus it there, or that could just be a general project where you're a beginning farmer and rancher, and you're wanting to get your own livestock operation up and running. So really, this specific question could fall in line with either or, with our general or with our youth. But as Joe said, if it's 4-H participant specific, might be better served as a youth project, a youth grant.
Okay, next one coming to you, Joe. Can a tribal charter school apply for the youth project?
Yes, they can. But they can also should apply through EDU. That would probably be a way to come through the as a educational organization. If it's a tribal charter school. If it's if I imagine that everything at a school is kind of youth oriented. So yes, they could apply as a youth project, but that's actually a school project as well. So that'll be something I'll talk with my colleagues about it. I'm wondering kind of what is your Catherine, what is your project? Maybe if you could put it in the box, it'll give us more help. We'll be able to answer it better.
Okay. Next question. This is a situational question. If my tribe has a garden plot on our reservation ran through our natural resources department that we use to supplement our emergency food pantry for tribal members, would we be eligible for this grant for us to build up a robust garden plot to be able to address food insecurity for our tribal members?
Yes, you'd be eligible. We're garden plots, an acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, and we don't know how much it is. A plot is in competition with other people doing agriculture work. So if someone were doing an overall irrigation re-infrastructure or irrigation development, a garden plot would have a hard time against something like that. So if it's a significant plot, you already said it yourself, food insecurity is the way to come at that question. You can't discount small scale farming, but if it's directly into the food pantry for food security. So
Okay,
the short answer is yes, it would be eligible.
awesome. All right, this one, Chanel, if you could weigh in on, are there any specific non-allowable expenditures? For example, salaries, equipment, land, etc.
So there are, as I discussed in the webinar, there are allowable and non-allowable use of funds, and there's specific information in this regarding this in our RFA overview. You are allowed to, so long as it's within the percentage and within the range of your budget that you'll see in the application, you are allowed to include salary. You are allowed to include materials such as fencing. We've had grantees purchase a boat to harvest their geoduck and clam. We've had grantees build a new fence around perimeters for cattle ranchers and producers. We've had individuals purchase equipment to build a food packaging storage facility, freezers, etc. Those are allowed in your project. So we do allow that. Land purchase is really more of a case-by-case basis, something that we would have to look at specifically in your project. We don't suggest that you submit an application that's just specifically purchasing land. So I would try to steer clear of that. But yeah, you are definitely allowed to utilize salary portion of your budget for salary, because we know that a lot of this work can't get done unless you have somebody directly overseeing it or directly working hand in hand in it. You are also able to utilize some of the budget to, if you are a stipend project, if you're distributing stipends, if you're using funding for regrants, some of our nonprofits do regrants. Our CDFIs use it for relending and capital. Those are all things that would be seen as allowable use of funds.
I want to add one more thing too, just because we had mentioned it earlier and it relates to this question. Projects that seek funding predominantly to provide outreach to those USDA programs and services, or for like resources for those types of activities that are related to or already being provided by USDA, that would not really be an eligible project because NAF funds would be providing to a redundant activity support, so that's unallowable. And then a note on salary, we please be very clear in your application if it is being allocated to that particular line item, then you need to be clear in how that person will help support the project and advance the goals to ultimately increase access to capital. So how is the role advancing agriculture in that aspect?
Okay, perfect. I'm going to get back to the questions, but I wanted to address this because it's been mentioned a couple of times. You will receive a copy of this recording. It will be on our website. And so if you scroll to the bottom of that 2026 RFA page, we don't have one up there now because this is our first informational webinar of the series, but that's where our webinars will live. And so you can always refer back to it. There's also a lot of documents on the web page. And another thing too is if you're not already, if you could follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, we do post things there and we highlight and share a lot of our grantee stories. So if you have an idea or you're wondering what kind of projects we fund, that's a really good place to check out some of the projects that we've highlighted. We've also been rolling out graphics that have our impact numbers from not just only this last year, but the last 5 years. So go ahead and follow us on social media. It's at Native Ag Fund. But then I'll move over to the next question. How does a grant work for loan funds providing capital to Native entrepreneurs? And that's from Tammy. How does a grant work for loan funds providing capital to Native entrepreneurs?
I think that would be through regrants or something. You'd have to have the central entity, like a CDFI, and they would be requesting a program for entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
and that would be the go through for the resource. The resource would come into the CDFI, and the CDFI would send it out or would, according to the process that they proposed, they would distribute it to the entrepreneurs. That's what I would think.
Okay. And really quick, Joe, do you have a story off the top of your head about some of the people that we've worked with that do regrants?
I know there was right now there's San Felipe is working with their farmers, and what they're doing is they're having all the business courses up front, the business seminars up front, and after someone participates in all the seminars, then they're available for a regrant. And after that point, it goes out to the individual. Excuse me.
Okay.
And I do
All
have
right.
more clarification on one question that was asked earlier. We're going to get official language for you, but the question was about whether or not an entity that's both a CDFI and a nonprofit, if they can apply to both tracks. So I think I misspoke earlier. Unfortunately, I don't believe that would be eligible for both of those particular funding tracks. But if you don't mind, the person that asked that question, if you could put your email address into the question or chat to our hosts, that way we can follow up with you separately, and we will be sure to also update our questions on the website once we have more clarity on that language. Thank you.
These are some tough questions because they're split in lines.
And then another thing I'm going to do is just drop, I know we went over email addresses and points of contact, but you're always able to, it's grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. You can send questions in and we can process them and answer them that way. We also do have that frequently asked questions tab at the bottom of our website on that 2026 RFA page. And so you can kind of see the dialogue that we've received from previous webinars. We've put some of those questions on that tab. So feel free to check that out as well. Okay, awesome. We have an email address right there. Okay.
Sam, I see the question from Gregory and then from anonymous attendee, and it's something about can projects be related across different funding tracks, such as general and education? And it depends on the relationship that you're making, because you probably have to get a good definition, a good clear vision of what your project is, and decide which one it goes through in that, because you can't put the same project in two of these categories. It won't go good for you if you do that. And you don't want to set up a project like in one section that absolutely leans on the next thing. So if this doesn't happen, this falls apart. They have to be independent enough that they can stand on their own, each idea.
Awesome. Okay. I think so. Currently, right now, we have no open questions. Oh, yes, Theo with the question. Okay, you ready for this, Dr. Graham? Can a tribe apply for this grant for multiple tribal departments if they have multiple departments that are ag and food related? I'll give an example that Theo gave us. One department handles the bison, cattle, and row crop operations, has needs for fencing. The other department works specifically on food sovereignty initiatives, greenhouse and produce, farmers markets, food and production sales, or produce sales, farm to school, etc. Or does a tribe only get one application and they have to?
The short answer is yes, they can, but yes, the short answer is that they can, but a more realistic answer is that there's only a limited amount of funds, and we have to spread them across the country and to different areas. In this question here, he's talking about bison ranching and farmers market, like produce and production. So the different areas that the funding goes to is spread around the country and spread around the parts of agriculture, various parts of agriculture. So um, one could do that, but the chances of both of them getting funded are probably very low. So it would probably be smart to see which is the best one, which is the most solid and airtight grant project, and go with that one first. Or the option to that is an overall big giant idea of the whole food system, and this as phase one, this as phase two, this as phase three, and so on.
Also, how cool to have all those travel departments.
Yeah, real cool.
Okay. So from Anonymous, does the grant support urban youth programs looking to reconnect kids with land-based education?
Joe, do you want to take that on?
Which question are we looking at?
He's thinking.
Oh, okay.
I can jump into so yes, I think we would need a little bit more information, but as long as the project is also connecting back to agriculture education related to
Sam, are
improving.
you picking up somebody writing?
Yes, Whitney's answering it right now.
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
not sure if I were able to hear me on that, but yeah, so as long as the project itself, yes, it could be tied back to land-based education, but in addition to that, you need to tie it back to the business side of agriculture and increasing the access to capital. Because you have to remember, the reason that we exist as NAAF is because of the original harms that Native farmers and ranchers experienced in Keep Eagle. So that's why we're always kind of hitting that point hard. And you heard Chanel talk about that in the presentation. That is a significantly high weighted evaluation group. So it's 25% of the evaluation score. And hopefully that answers your question. If you have a more specific follow-up, we're happy to address that as well.
Okay, would this funding help support the development of a CSA program for our tribal food sovereignty farm?
CSA program, what are you calling CSA?
That's what our anonymous listed. Development of a CSA program.
Can you drop in the chat, whoever asked the question, what CSA stands for?
Community
Supported
supported.
Supported, yeah, it's community supported agriculture.
Yes.
Yeah.
It would be really good for that.
Yeah.
Of course, depending on what the project was. Like, let's say if it was a greenhouse project or something like that. And there are other places. Oh, it's like buying shoes.
Are you thinking, Joe?
No, I'm looking at some of this from media, what's coming in from media. Yeah, so definitely if you have a that kind of structure in place already, um, the idea of the project that you want to have funded, it would this would be a potential funding source for you. So you should probably apply.
Okay. So far, we've answered all of the questions. I know that in previous webinars, we've kind of just taken a breath and a pause to see if there are other questions that people can think of. Now is the time.
There was a question that came in, and I wanted to just clarify. The question was, as an EDU org, could we apply for multiple focus areas under the general focus? So could we apply for the business assistance focus and apply for advocacy service focus areas? So there is only one general application, and so those would need to be morphed. So don't submit an application that's separate that is focusing on those. That's just an umbrella of the things we like to see in a NAAF grant application are those things: business assistance, advocacy services, etc. So keep those into one application. I did answer that in the chat, but I wanted to just clarify that that's just one. We are only asking for those specific things to be in one application. So you don't have to separate them. You could, however, if you wanted to apply for your educational organization general project, and then you might have an idea specifically for the youth, you could apply that way. But don't split up those for, we're not asking you to split up those specific for kind of markers we put into what it is that you can apply for when applying for our funds.
And while we're reviewing these next questions that have come in, I'm going to do a quick run through of our Request for Applications webpage. On our webpage for Request for Applications, you can scroll down we have right at the top here our requests for applications overview document. This is going to be the best place to start. This is going to give you really a breakdown of what we've talked about today. You can also look at the questions that are included in the application before you set up and found it. So you can go through your general questions, your youth question list, and also the link to apply. As you scroll down, you'll have all the deadline reminders. You'll have our contact information. And then in this section here, you're going to have the intro information, but eligibility. So are you an eligible entity? The different funding areas that are available. Here's our huge list of downloads. So everything you're going to need when you're completing your request for applications. Again, this overview document, the budget template, budget guidelines, sample budgets, the budget narrative, and really our helpful tool to also start is our frequently asked questions list. And then this checklist here will give you required documents. Chanel had reviewed these in our presentation. And again, if you wanted to ask more questions for our webinars, you're welcome to reach out to our grants at email. We'll answer those in the meantime, but also we'll have our question and answer period in March 19th, April 2nd, and April 9th. One important note, and if another team member can confirm this for me, we are doing something a little bit different this year, and we do have a deadline in advance of the actual submission for the application. We also have a deadline for questions, and I believe it's a week out. We're gonna double check that. It might be under the, actually, let's use this deadlines frequently asked questions. So we'll find the answer, and maybe a staff member can help jump in on that, but I'll get you the date for sure. But just
the 23rd of April, I believe, is the last day that they can ask questions.
great, perfect.
Double checking.
Yeah, 23rd of April. I think it's going to be up here. We're double checking that for you. Sorry, it's not very clear on the website. We're going to make that change for you. But that being said, in the past, you've been able to ask a question right up to the last minute. We've always been trying to be responsive as we can. But that new date is new this year. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And also, if you want a question and don't want to sort through the frequently asked questions, we also have a chat bot here at the bottom of our website. So you can try to get an answer there. And then if still you don't get your answer, feel free to give us a call or send us an email.
And just circling back to that, Whitney, what Whitney just shared, we're unable to provide specific answers to your questions. If you submit us a pre-document like, hey, this is my rough outline, can you review it? We are not allowed to do that as we are in open period. So we are happy to answer questions on eligibility, on budget, specifics just in terms of your application, but we cannot review any pre-documents that you have, and we cannot say, oh, this is absolutely something we would 100% fund. Yes, but tweak this, this, and this. We have to keep our questions basic. So just have some patience with us as we navigate those questions, but happy to go through and answer, as Sam shared, the questions that come through from that grants at inbox.
Okay. Are we ready to hop back in? It looks like, I'm not sure if Joe, if you're still typing back to Holly, but Holly asked,
I am, but I'll just answer it then.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just answer it then. This is Holly's question about requests for capital, like a facility or construction. The answer is yes, you can, but realistically, if you're thinking about something community-wide, there's not much these days that 200 can get. So if it's a bigger project than that, you're going to need matching funds. You're going to have to have sources from somewhere else. But if there's some capital project that you can get for the 200, if that was the amount of your application, then I believe that you can. If it's like an outbuilding, maybe it's a well or something like that, then yes, I believe that you can request funds for that.
And just keeping in mind too, I know we don't have the screen up that shows the allowable or the funds, the pooled funds this year, but if you're applying so each pool minus the CDFIs has $1 million cap. The amount that you can apply for is $200,000 in the educational institutions, and for tribes in 501c3s, the max amount you can apply for is $250,000. The youth, the max you can apply for is $200,000. For CDFIs, we just ask that you don't apply for the full cap amount, which is $5.5 million. So it looks that what Joe just answered looks a little bit different, as if you're coming from a CDFI standpoint, or even a tribal standpoint, as comparison to an EDU. But keep that in mind, that we have those caps that you cannot exceed that requested amount. So 200,000 for EDUs, 200,000 for youth, 250 for tribes and 501c3s, and we ask that you don't hit the $5.5 million cap for a CDFI.
Okay, awesome. All right, we're gonna head to Manzanita's question. And so a few messages came in from Manzanita, so I'm just gonna summarize it really quick. As a tribal garden supporting small scale farmers, how can we provide access to capital and continue offering educational hands-on workshops when the loss of LFPA funds has left us without an operating budget for free, healthy food programs?
Joe, do you want to tackle it?
Well, I can try. It's it sounds like what Manzanita is describing is that they have this project, or they want to get this project going. It's a small project, but how do you bring in this big idea of access to capital into a small project? Well, that's the difficult task of the whole thing. I mean, there's training in what would be the that this is
Yeah, I
a
think
because
too.
I was thinking
Yeah, I think Joe.
to
Yeah,
market, but it's that small. If it's a tribal garden, it may not be to market. It may just be to food security. Um, and I see that you had the loss of some funds, but I that's really difficult, and a lot of people are in that same boat at this time. Um,
I think that you made a good point, Joe. Maybe it's food security, and we've had other projects come through where it was small level, small scale community gardens. Then they were what one of our grantees had done in the past was they were revitalizing food sovereignty in their community. So they started off by creating a group who was facilitating discussion and providing training on what it is to become a new beginning farmer and rancher, and they had hands-on training, and they were able to grow their own produce. From growing their own produce, they were able to then they created a local farmers market that wasn't even in their community. They created this local farmers market and allowed the people that were participating in their group to then sell the produce that they were growing in their local community farmers market. We've had something similar up in Alaska in a very rural community. So I think you just have to look at what access to capital looks like specifically in your community, and not so much in like a broader view, but in your lens and your scope. Really define that in your narrative. What does that mean to you? What does that look like to you? And maybe it is revitalizing that food sovereignty piece, as opposed to the I guess, what were we saying? Yeah, just focusing on that effort. But that's a great question.
I know we're getting lots of good questions. Um,
It is.
okay.
It's a difficult question to address, because even capital, access to capital, if you're thinking about it in terms of access to banking and stuff like that, that may not be the way capital is defined in your community. So I think Chanel made a great point there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So coming to Emma's question, would community-supported agriculture funding support the purchase of the produce for free distribution to the community?
Don't think we've come across this before, but if I if I
Joe,
uh, if I would have to venture a guess, I would think that that doesn't sound like something that fund unless it was presented in a very um, a way that is like helping the local producers maybe, to acquire the stuff that goes out into the community. So, but to buy it from outside sources or something like that. And so somebody might want to jump in and help me with this one because doesn't sound like something that we would do.
Oh, okay. So Emma did just write another question for reference. We have a farm in the village with a farmer's market where we sell the produce. Would the funds support subsidized prices for that produce?
Emma, I think you just provided us a discussion question for one of our next meetings because that is an interesting angle that you're coming at from. Are you talking about um, purchase of products from the local producers at the local farmers market, where you're assisting the tribal producers? That would be the question. That would be a key question to that. If you're buying from outside from everybody for this, you know.
Exactly, she said.
Emma said
Okay.
exactly.
Well,
Yep.
I I'm very interested to see your application because you'll a lot of what's happening, Emma, is it's going to be about framing. How are you framing your request? How are you framing your application to say this is what we're going to do and this is how this is benefiting the local producers?
And where you can, try to include, data or other information to address the farmer and rancher need for your community, because only you know your community best. We have reviewers from all over the country with different backgrounds and experiences. So make sure that you're speaking to
Yeah. It's
audience.
kind of like a it's kind of like a food pantry model where they collectively buy from different entities and then turn it into a redistribution. And Emma, if I'm not saying that correctly,
And Manzanita, where can you drop in the chat where you're from? Manzanita said we buy from
please
tribal
make
producers.
correct. That's going to be a
Uh-oh, Joe.
You were cutting
Um,
out a little bit, Joe.
oh. Oh, I was just saying that it was going to be that's going to be an interesting question when we all get together because it's kind of like a food pantry model where you're getting from the where the entity is buying from outside and then redistributing it inside.
Cool. And I had
okay.
mentioned on there before, sorry, Joe, I kind of cut you off a little bit. Manzanita had mentioned in the chat that they buy from producers. So I was asking where that was. I think that was in response to the other question we were answering. So just wanted to throw that out there. These are great questions. And the questions, I think Whitney had just answered that. We do try to update all of the new questions that we get in our FAQ section on the website. And this will all be captured, though all the Q&A is captured and you're able to go back and look through all of this information as well. But is that correct, Whitney? We go and update the
That is correct, because I mean, these are, I'm gonna be honest, these are some new questions that we have never heard, and people are coming up with innovative ideas to address needs of native agriculture. So I'm really excited to hear this and see that we're likely going to get some new applications this year. But yes, we will have our responses at the bottom of the web page, and then we'll also include them in the email that will be sent to all registrants of this webinar.
It looks like there's one last question that popped up from Bailey, and Bailey had asked, please describe how competitive this round is anticipated to be, perhaps compared to last year's cycle. We really can't answer that right now. We just opened our RFA on March 1st. I would anticipate it being similar in comparison. We did get a good number of applications last year, but it's just too early to tell. But I would say it's going to be another competitive year. And I wanted to flag as well that just reminding people the questions that we are only allowed to answer up until the 23rd. So if you do have questions, please get those in to us as soon as possible. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, Bailey. Are you able to share how many applications? We'd have to go back and look at that number. I don't have the number off the top of my head. Also, this year, if you are a new applicant, and you have never applied for NAAF funding, we will allow you the opportunity. If you do not get selected for funding, you will be allowed the opportunity for a feedback call with our CEO and our associate CEO. So this goes for any new applicants that have never applied for NAAF grant funds before. You will have the capacity to reach out and ask for that feedback call. We do give, if you are not selected for funding, we do send a denial letter to you, and we do put bullets in your denial letter sharing what we encourage you to do in your next application if you choose to apply again. And sometimes it's not even that you had a bad application, it's just we have a cap we have to stick to, the $1 million cap in each one of our categories, minus the CDFI categories. Their cap is bigger, but we have to stick to that cap, and we have a lot of great applications. So sometimes it was a very competitive year. Yeah, but I likely will be another competitive year for the process as a whole.
Yes, Chanel's right. It's always competitive, and it seems to get a little bit more competitive each year.
And this year, I think it could be even more so since we don't have our special emphasis categories. So now, in the past, you were able to apply for special emphasis category, and now we're only having general applications and youth applications. So.
Okay. At this time, there are no open questions. Does anyone want to maybe leave with some final thoughts or recommendations or kind of like a bottom line to end this webinar, and maybe another question comes through?
I have one just as a reminder. I said it earlier, but when you're writing your application, make sure you're writing as if you're, writing to someone completely unfamiliar with where you're from, what the agricultural needs are of your community, and we all come with different backgrounds and experiences, and just make sure that you provide as much detailed information as possible. We love seeing that in applications.
Absolutely. The more details, the better. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We
you.
do have 3 more webinars in our webinar series. The first portion will be the same throughout our webinar series. We're going to do the overview. You're going to hear from programs and compliance. And then the Q&A period, there hopefully will be different people, and so different questions arise each time. However, if you're going through the application process and you're like, you know what, I want to hop on the webinar and ask this question, we invite you back to do so. So we will post this on our website, an email will go out. And remember to follow us on social media to see any updates. You can also go check out our grantee database on nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. If you go and select grantees, you kind of see like a wide map, and you get to read the project summaries of grantees that have been with us already. So thank you all so much for being here today. Thanks to our speakers for being here today, and we will catch you at the next webinar.